All right, welcome to Art Stream. Today I am illustrating Starwalker chapters 67 and 68. And I am joined by my friend Hattie the Writer, whose Wattpad account and story I will be linking down in my pinned comment. So yesterday we had a really good stream,
Oh,
and
thanks.
then you're welcome. Yesterday I had a really good stream. We had a really good stream, and we had a big bleach rant. And by bleach, I don't mean like the cleaning thing. I mean like the anime. Hattie had a bleach rant. The problem is that I accidentally doxed myself, and so like I had to delete the stream. Otherwise, people would know my real name and some other stuff that I didn't want them to know. So we're live now. I am hoping that I don't dox myself accidentally this time. We shall see. Please keep in mind that if you are talking from Discord, you will be recorded. If you would only like to send a message to the Shadow Spies, you can use the text channel stream discussion. All right, and with that said, let's get started, I guess. So, yeah.
Great.
I forgot to link your story on the first stream. I need to go back and do it. I mentioned you in the pinned comment, but I for some reason brain was did not make the connection of, hey, you should probably link at least his Wattpad, if not his actual story. So I don't know. I'll do it after
Yeah,
this stream.
definitely. It's also on AO3 and FF, but
Yeah.
out of the three platforms, AO3 and Wattpad are the better two.
Yeah.
I tell that to all the readers that I personally talk to in DMs over the various writing and story and fan-based communities I am in, because those have pretty picture commissions done by my friend Andrea.
That's wonderful.
So,
Yeah,
yes.
I would also recommend if you are reading Allura to do AO3 or Wattpad, not FF, because I'm the same way. I have illustrations that I did by myself, and they are not, I can't display them on AO3. So this
Yeah.
this picture is very intense, just as a warning. There's nothing like super graphic, but there is violence because we got that going on right now. This scene
Yeah.
is actually one of my favorites in the story, though, because like on a writing level, not on a like, oh, I love that my characters are choking each other. Like, no, that's not what I like. So
Feel the same way with my battle scenes, because in chapters 17 and 24 through 25 of my own story, which have yet to be released, are a ways away, because I still have some editing stuff I want to do with those. um I feel that way with them. It's like I don't want to injure my characters that I love, but hey,
I
we gotta
love
do it.
I love being the like an evil writer. I don't know. It's just fun.
Yeah, I did that with my Smash Bros fic, where the body count is actually at 6. I
Whoa.
kill off way more characters there than I do in
Well,
WHHS.
it's
Like in my
Smash,
Smash
so that
Bros
makes
fic,
sense.
Decagon, I kill off 6, I think. Wait, no. I think I kill off 7, actually. There's a bunch of deathy death in that one.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's,
Legs.
yeah, oh, that one was exhilarating to write, because instead of having an outline like I do for Wholehearted Half Souls, for Decagon, I was writing week to week like a manga author who's like had to turn my hobby into a part-time job just to get it done. And it's like, wow, it was kind of intense, but my beta reader did a great job. She's a wonderful person. um she's actually going to have a baby relatively soon, which is
Oh
pretty
wow.
epic.
That's
Yep.
that's amazing. I don't know why, but like I mean like so I'm 18. Obviously, I'm not a parent. I'm not married. I'm not even dating anybody. But like I keep remembering. I'm just like, "Oh yeah, those adults like they have babies and stuff. Soon my friends are going to be having babies at some point." And I'm like, "That's strange to think about." So,
No, it's strange for me to think about too, but I'm 26,
yeah.
and the thing is, out of the closest friend group that I have, one of my friends has a kid, and she's I don't know how old, but two of my other closest friends, one of them is married, and the other is in a serious relationship. And at the moment, I'm the only single guy within that friend group
It's
who's
okay.
like not dating at all. I'm married to my job.
I'm married to my job.
How it is. So, hey.
Oh, this. Oh man, I just realized this picture is actually pretty challenging to do.
You'll get it. You've done good art before.
Okay, I'm actually gonna have to draw her vertically. Okay, I'm gonna have to do some magic here. Okay.
Speaking of artwork,
yeah.
Despite my Bleach rant that went into the previous unaired live stream, I must say, one aspect I still love about Bleach, even though I don't like the series anymore, is that the art has always been crisp. Despite all the burnout that TJ Kubo has dealt with over the years, his art is flippin' amazing and is probably the best aspect of his series.
Really? Because you had said that the art style like really declined in quality.
You know, I was mistaken. I will admit, I have not read through the final 1,000-Year Blood War all the way through, so that arc in particular is fuzzy. But I stumbled across some panels from it, and the art is actually still pretty dang strong. So the decline, is not nearly as sharp as what I thought at first.
Yeah.
I think the Hueco Mundo arc was kind of a fake out because that setting is meant to be a dark desert kind of setting. So everything is like gray and white and black and little color, and it's supposed to be plain and desolate. So when thinking about trying to get across the setting of Hueco Mundo, after thinking about it last night and sleeping on it, I was like, you know what? Kubo's art actually stays pretty consistently strong. So I'm going to retract that statement and not complain about it anymore.
Yeah.
So that's looking at that. And of course, I can't judge the series based on the 1,000-Year Blood War arc because I have not read most chapters in the arc. I read a little bit at the beginning. I read up to the flashback of Captain Number 1, who's the old man guy. I forget his name. It's probably something fancy like Yamamoto or something. But it was around there that I stopped reading it, and then once the final chapter is released, I read like the last couple with Ichigo versus Yawach, or Yawach,
yeah,
or Yawach, however you pronounce it. And that was about it. So I have not read that arc in full, but I know basically what happens. And I know also the middle part of the arc, thanks to some YouTube videos that I watched last night that discussed those things.
Are you kidding me? That is... Hold on, sorry. Like I said, this is the stream where Joye commits iPad arson. Okay, I've just realized I didn't do something right. That makes a lot of sense, though. Okay, let's see. Yeah, that makes more sense. Okay. I'm trying to draw.
Yeah, and I respect the heck out of artists because doing art, not just the character designs, but also the backgrounds, takes a lot of effort, a ton of effort. And I frankly don't have time for that, so
yeah.
I don't do it.
This is a very violent scene.
Lovely. Sounds like a lot of Bleach battles.
Okay.
Yo, like, I would be happy to rant about Bleach again.
if you want to repeat the Bleach rant, I'm sure it would be fine.
Wonderful, excellent. So, let's talk about the series I used to love. So, since the previous stream, that is not going to air, was looking at this one, I've been able to collect my thoughts and sound more professional, which gives me a leg up, which is amazing. But let me tell you, Bleach is sad. And not in the way where it's like, oh, boo-hoo, everything sucks and is terrible. No, the heroes win, and each arc has a happy ending overall. Even after Mundo, where Ichigo temporarily, I gotta emphasize that, temporarily loses his powers. Although, if you were to ask me, it probably would have been good to stop there. Well, on one hand. But on the other hand, the Thousand Blood War arc does a bunch of things that actually kind of revive the series a little bit. But that's more of a blind recommendation, so I'll get to that later. But I used to love the series because with looking at the Soul Society arc, it does a lot of things right. And the beginning training arc with Ichigo about how his motivation is fleshed out to protect his dad and his little sisters from evil ghosts called Hollows. That is a kick butt hook. And the art style is crisp, and the characters are simple but still likable. The battle scenes are epic. I think the power leveling and training is also done really well in Bleach, especially with Ichigo, because it's like he starts out slaying evil ghosts in his hometown is called Karakura Town. And in order to protect his family and the neighbors, he starts out with that as a substitute Soul Reaper. And he does a good job of it, but apparently that is a capital punishment offense. And Rukia, one of his friends who gives him those powers in the first place, is thus brought before the courts and is sentenced to die through the piercing of her heart and destroying her soul from the inside out. And Ichigo's like, you can't do that, your justice system sucks. And then Rukia's older brother, Byakuya, who does side with the government, he's like, I don't care. Well, it seems that way on the outside. But on the inside, he's actually super conflicted. So Byakuya's a brilliant villain throughout the first 3 seasons, and he ends up being, later on, turns into an anti-hero, and is probably one of the better developed characters in the series. But it starts out so well, and I really enjoyed Season 1, and I adore Season 2. Season 3 is also really good, but one could argue that the show starts to fall apart when Aizen reveals that he's been evil all along, and he wants to do a lot of stuff where he becomes, a god among men, or a god among soul reapers. So he's basically Lucifer. He's a secular retelling of Lucifer trying to stand with God and among the heavens and being the strongest being in the universe. It's a secular retelling of that, of sorts. Yeah. And it sets up for him to be a decent villain, but there are a bunch of storytelling issues that I have questions about and concerns about when the Arrancar / Mundo arc begins. And then it starts. And Ichigo, okay, so the biggest 3 flaws of the series are that there's too much filler, number 1. Number 2, I wish more characters got good character development. And 3, it's just too dang long, and the plot pacing is too dang slow at times. Those are the 3 big killers about Bleach. The art is still good throughout, and that's one statement I've had to retract. The art is actually pretty good even at the end of the series, even with Kubo's burnout. And I also gotta say, it's not Kubo's fault that sales dropped. It's not. Shonen Jump just sucks. They are terrible people.
Yeah. Anyway. The anime industry in general, they're very abusive.
Oh, they are. And with my own favorite series, Full Metal Alchemist, concerning manga, the original manga, and also for anime, Brotherhood, because Brotherhood follows the OG manga more closely. I don't know how Hiromi Arakawa survived, other than that FMA is not a Shonen Jump series.
Yeah.
It was actually a Shonen seasonal series, I think, where one chapter went live about once a month, I think. It was either once every 2 weeks or once a month. So chapters were able to be longer. But not only that, Arakawa also had more wiggle room to work with because she simply had more time to work with the story and prepare it than the week-to-week authors. And since the Shonen seasonal series that FMA was a part of doesn't publish nearly as frequently, this also means that because sales are down, comparatively speaking, it means less money made by the executive producers, which means there's a lower desire for money, which means there's less likely of a potential for the mo money, mo problems phrase to come to a head and come to manifest itself.
Mm-hmm.
And I think because of the more forgiving schedule, that's why FMA not only stayed fresh, but also that Arakawa was able to work it through and avoid burnout better than other authors. So not only would I say it's the best manga series I've ever read, and honestly the best story I've ever read concerning fiction, also I think Arakawa's love for telling manga stories has stayed pretty much intact compared to someone like Kubo, who out of the big three suffered the worst brunt of Shonen Jump's abuse.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a shame. I mean, Oda and Kishimoto, I'm sure, have dealt with burnout concerning One Piece and Naruto, respectively. But
I mean,
they
Naruto's
haven't
got
dealt with it
so
as
much.
much as Kubo has.
Yeah, Naruto has so much, so many episodes, you know?
Oh yeah, and One Piece and all big three shows do that too. But I think for filler percentage, I think Bleach is the highest, if I recall correctly. If not, it's Naruto.
Oh yeah,
Um,
Naruto, my sister loves the show, but she was like, that is definitely the biggest problem.
oh yeah, and that is one of Bleach's biggest problems too. I would say probably the biggest problem where filler takes up seasons 4 and 5 with the Bound arc, which stinks compared to Soul Society. It's such a downgrade in storytelling, but it's not the worst filler in the
Ooh.
show. But then seasons 9, 13, and 15 rear their ugly heads, and you're like, what the crap is this?
Yeah.
And yeah, yeah. Apparently, one of the filler original characters in season 9, and in the Bridge series, the creators of said Bridge series decided to give that character a George W. Bush voice
Oh
in
yeah.
the abridged dub, and it's so funny. I don't know what the title of it
Whoa.
was, and I'm not sure if Senahort made it or a different abridged creator did. It's been too many years. It's been like a decade since I watched it, but wow. it, it's so frustrating and sad because, you know, they don't have enough material, and I understand that, but you could at least put in a little more effort to come up with a half-decent filler story.
Well,
I mean,
yeah.
the Bound arc has a bunch of issues, but you can at least say that the creators tried to make the story of quality. But from what I remember, the little bit that I remember of the other filler seasons, I don't know.
Yeah.
I really don't know.
And filler can be interesting. My only issue is if it's not interesting and or gets in the way of the main story, which like that happens when shows have so much filler and or when the writers decide to purposely put in filler there instead of develop their characters, which happened with Shira, I feel like. Not that and Shira has very little filler. The reason I complain about it is that they did not have many episodes, and if you don't have many episodes, you have to make the most of the episodes that you have. Like, this is basic show running business. And I, again, not a showrunner, but like, you know, I would imagine that'd be just basic show running stuff. Like, you have to balance stuff so that it's not weird like that. I don't know.
Yeah, you totally have to. That's absolutely right. And Bleach does not do that, unfortunately. So Kubo's Precious series gets clapped on by filler, and the original manga does not suffer from this. So if you want the most optimal version of the story, you go read the original manga.
I'll tell my
But
sister about that because
yeah,
she does want to experience Bleach. I just had to tell her. I was like, well, my friend said this about it, and seems like season 3 is the last like super good season.
Correct. I would say season 1 is downright great, and then seasons 2 and 3 are the peak, which would be up to the end of Soul Society, where now she still wants to read it, so I wouldn't spoil this personally to her, but like
You can spoil it to me.
as,
She doesn't watch my YouTube videos.
great. As soon as Ichigo defeats Byakuya, that is, as soon as he screams to the sky that he wins, that's where, in my opinion, Bleach peaks. Like, that is so exhilarating. He saves Rukia's life. Byakuya has a bit of a redemption moment where he's like, you know what, I still love my sister, but I sided with the government, and I believe that it was right, but you've given me a lot to think about. And then Byakuya teleports away to go get his wounds healed and to rest. And it's a very great moment between two warriors that fight on opposite sides, but they don't have bitterness. It's like Byakuya's like, you know what, Ichigo, I get why you're doing this. And Ichigo's like, dude, I don't hate you personally. I just hate the system that you're siding with. And he's like, yeah, I get it. So the villain has a great redemption arc moment. And Ichigo gets a lot of good maturity throughout that entire arc and develops super well. And the power leveling that he has in the training is actually paced very nicely. He doesn't like go through Mary Sue sudden jump power of friendship style boosts in power. That doesn't happen. Rather, he has to work hard for it, and it's done at a steady pace.
Yeah.
Which is very nice. And like against like his second or third opponent, like against Renji and Zaraki, he would have lost had it not been for his evil hollow side with an asterisk there, and I might get into that later, bailing him out at the last minute. But that's where it peaks.
Yeah.
I would still argue that Ichigo shows signs of growing in maturity in Huecamundo, which is nice, but his motive does stay the same. So I don't think he's a terrible character, but he is a little more static than other main protagonists you might see in the anime world. So that's a warning to anyone who wants to pick up Bleach. Yeah, I think concerning ranking him against other shonen protagonists, I think Ichigo's okay. He's definitely not my favorite protagonist, but I think he's pretty alright. Me personally, while Luffy is a lovable goofball, I would say I like Ichigo more as a character than I do Luffy, but I'd still rank him below Naruto. Even though Naruto's Mary Soup level jumps are more extreme than Ichigo's are, I sympathize with Naruto more as a character.
That's fair.
And I really like Naruto's growth and maturity, because during the Chunin exams, before the Chunin exams for Naruto, I was like, oh, am I going to hate this character? But after that, he started to grow on me during my first watch, and then once the Chunin exams were over, I'm like, I actually like Naruto now. And then in part 2, concerning his personality, he drops the annoying vibes that he has in part 1, and he's a lot more mature. Like, he's not pulling pranks or doing graffiti or whatever like he was in part 1. Like, he's grown up.
Yeah.
And people actually like him now. And he's a lot smarter and wiser in part 2 than he is in part 1. Like, his intelligence stat takes a big spike in between those parts. But, like, he still feels like himself, where he's this optimist. And he'll vow not only to become Hokage, but figure out a redemption arc for his best friend turned enemy, Sasuke.
Oh, that's the role Sasuke plays. I feel like whenever I do get around to watching Naruto, I have a long list of animes I want to watch. I feel like when I do get around to watching Naruto, Sasuke is going to be a favorite because I like villains, so.
Part 1 Sasuke, I think you'll like.
What?
Part 1 Sasuke, I think you'll like.
Oh, I see.
Part 2, tread lightly.
Oh, okay. Don't spoil me.
Part 2 Sasuke is extremely divisive, and he's probably the most divisive character in the entire anime world.
Oh.
You either love him or you hate him. And there are a bunch of things done with his character in part 2 that I'm seriously confused about. And it sounded good in theory, but was not well executed, in my opinion. So,
Yeah, I've heard that Naruto has that moment where it's like it's kind of like and I hesitate to call it like the prequels because some people are going to get really offended, but it's like you have a great episode or arc or whatever followed by a terrible one. You know, that's what I've noticed with my sister as she's watched it. I don't know.
Naruto happens to have this too. I don't think it's as extreme as it is with Bleach. I think Naruto's highs are less low than Bleach's lows, but they're still low. Like part 1 is pretty consistently good if you cut out the filler, but part 2 starts out kind of slow. It doesn't start heating up until the pain arc. Everyone loves the pain arc, and for great reason. It develops both the heroes and the villains very nicely. But then the story gets slow again. And then we get to the final Ninja War arc, and
Yeah.
I really like the ending of the series. I think it's really well done. But getting there is a bit of a minefield. It's a bit of a train wreck, honestly.
Yeah.
But that's event for another time. With looking at Naruto and Bleach, just contrasting them concerning after their golden years, like the storytelling quality falls off a bit, but for different, I think perhaps for slightly different reasons. I think with Bleach, the issue is there are less plot holes than what there are in Naruto, possibly, but I find the story to be more boring. Like with the Hueco Mundo arc, it still develops Ichigo well. I love the treatment Rukia gets. I think Grimmjow is a great rival to Ichigo. I love that. But a lot of the other villains feel kind of squandered. And with the minor main heroes, after thinking about it, concerning the ones that we met within the Gote 13 and the Soul Society arc, I kind of get that because we've already established who they are. But the Hueco Mundo Espada don't really get a lot of development past Ulquiorra, Grimmjow, and Halle Bell. Those three get decent development, especially Grimmjow. I love him. He is a great rival character. But the other 7, I struggle to care about. Okay, Arimiaro is okay, but he's more so there to further Rukia's development and give her backstory. So there he serves his purpose pretty well. But the other 6, we spend a lot of time seeing them on screen, if I recall correctly, and I just don't care about the other 6. Like, when I think back on Bleach, I'm like, I don't care about these people, and I don't really know who they are. Not as much as I would have liked. And I think it's a quality over quantity thing, because there are a lot of episodes with them in it, but I struggle to remember any big moments that they have. Outside of, like, the battles where they get defeated.
Right.
Yeah, because, like, when they get defeated, it feels great. It feels great for the heroes, but for them, it's like, oh, it's another bad guy that falls, who's controlled by Aizen, and Aizen controls the plot, so he's the only one that really matters at the moment. I think it's good for the villains to challenge the heroes, and I think the Spada do a decent job of that. I will admit that, but when I compare it to other shows, there are far more memorable villains, and comparatively speaking, it really doesn't do its job like it could have, because with all the episodes that Bleach has, I think there's a lot of missed potential there to seriously dive deep with who these characters were.
Yeah. Definitely. I think that I've noticed that with a lot of animes where it's just like, I really like this, but I want more of it. And there's just like not time, or there's not, I don't know. That's why I really like that Persona 5 was so long, because they take time to thoroughly develop all the main characters, and because there are a lot of main characters, they have to spend a whole lot of time on them. The only one that I would say has active issues with development is Haru, Okumura because she's the last Phantom Thief introduced um, before like the final climax and stuff happens. So, yeah.
Yeah, there I get it though, because she's introduced so late into the series.
Yeah.
So it's like, all right. I understand why you're not as well developed.
I do think Haru has they did like a character development speed run for her, and I actually think all things considered, it turned out really well. I think, and some Persona 5 fans I've seen on Tumblr, because I don't associate with the fandom, I only see stuff from my peripheral, like from Jenny and stuff, is like they seem to have this idea that like Haru being like, and spoilers for Persona 5 for anybody who wants to play the game, click off this video, it's too good to spoil yourself for. Okay. But like Haru has a horrible father who's trying to marry her off to a huge creep, but she still cares about him, and when they go to steal his heart, she's not doing it to get revenge on him the way some of the other Phantom Thieves are. She's doing it because she still cares about him and thinks that there might be a chance for him to change. I do believe that, and I think that that is one of the strengths of her character, but other people seem to see it as like, oh, you have to forgive your abuser, and I'm like, yeah, that's actually a good thing to do. Like, it's a good thing to forgive people. Doesn't mean you have to reconcile with them. Does mean that you should forgive them. That is a medically good thing to do.
It's freeing for the soul.
Yeah.
Oops. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, that's... Yeah. But still giving her decent enough development despite being introduced late is pretty impressive. Cause, like,
I do. I think it's very impressive.
Who are introduced late who still get good development, but then others, like, are introduced late and you're like, well, this explains why they're not as high on my personal favorite character ranking, because they were introduced so late and we barely got to know them. And I was watching through, I finished my rewatch of FMA 2003 today, which is, as I call it, the alternate timeline version of the Full Metal Alchemist story, because Brotherhood, while a couple of episodes here and there have elements that are not canon to the original manga, I still call Brotherhood canon because 90-something% of it still follows the original story. But 2003, on the other hand, is closer to like the 50 to 60% range.
Oh, wow.
And so because of that, I consider it to be an alternate timeline entirely. Like, it starts out pretty similar to the manga with filler episodes here and there, but by the time you hit part 3 / season 3, whatever label you prefer for it, the story veers off into its own path. But Arakawa actually allowed the showrunners of 2003 to do this, because she's like, I don't want my story to be chock full of filler up to the point where it's like, okay, now we have enough material from Arakawa again, now we can continue the story. Like, Arakawa was like, I seriously do not want that to happen. You guys can make your own original story, and then it can get picked up, and we can start anew for, they didn't call this at the time, obviously, but Brotherhood, when that rolls around. But, like, I experienced that late minor character addition crisis with Pride of the 2003 series, the final homunculus to be introduced, which is similar to Brotherhood / the original manga, actually, but Pride manifests differently. And I can't say why because of spoilers, because Joy and I will be watching through FMA Brotherhood later this month to start, and I really don't want to say anything. So
my sister's gonna be joining as well.
It's like both versions of Pride have very different trajectories. Pride in Brotherhood is arguably the most chilling villain in the entire series, even more than the main villain, honestly. But 2003 Pride, on the other hand, gets introduced. The plot twist is cool, but they barely develop his character, and he he kind of his character development isn't much at all, and he's revealed later in the series to be Pride, and I can't say who, but like said character is revealed to be that final homunculus in I think anywhere from episode 38 to 42. And the reveal is cool, but we don't develop him a lot past that, and he's not made out to be especially sympathetic or interesting. He's just kind of there. Like at one point, Envy calls him a puppet, and it makes a lot of sense.
Oh my gosh, that's funny.
Oh, I'm not sure if you'll ever watch the 2003 version of the show, but whether you watch it or not, alongside Brotherhood, Envy is very, very interesting. And despite doing a lot of bad stuff, he's actually one of the most popular characters somehow. But I can't say why, so I won't.
It's okay.
Yeah, but finishing my Bleach rant, I mean, it's not really a rant. It's more like a discourse on why the show fell off for me. Mundo's plot pacing moves a lot slower, and I'm not a fan of that. I think they could have squeezed a lot more story beats into fewer chapters, and it would have been better off for it. Like, Soul Society only lasts 2 seasons, and I think that arc has really good plot pacing, honestly. It kept me hooked the entire time. But the Arrancar / Mundo arc lasts for 7 seasons.
Dang, that was a lot.
Yeah. From Aizen's betrayal reveal up until Ichigo defeats Aizen, it lasts for 7 seasons of various episode amounts. And that's too many episodes, honestly. Where, yes, the location changes. It starts with them invading Mundo, and then there's a battle in the fake Karakura town, and then we have the final confrontation after that. So the setting changes a little bit, but the overall long-running story stays the same. And for me, it can get kind of boring after a while, especially since, like,
there's a lot of
I was rewatching some Bleach reviews I've seen in the past, and this is where the main villain, Aizen, frustrates me with the Mundo arc. I understand that villains are supposed to be very strong and all-powerful, but with the amount of times that he reveals that he was planning, like, this plan and that plan and this plan and that plan all along for centuries, it really destroys my, suspense of disbelief.
Oh.
It really destroys that at some times. And I'm like, you actually planned Ichigo's birth. You actually planned this to happen in his life so you would reach this point in order to become God or whatever. Like, the amount of times that Aizen does this, I'm like, my suspension of disbelief is killed. I don't know about this.
Yeah.
And his power leveling and overpoweredness gets so ridiculous. And then what's kind of funny is that one unexpected turn that the series takes is that despite him being supposedly all-powerful and untouchable, Ichigo's dad reveals himself as being a retired Soul Reaper. He comes out of retirement. He actually goes toe-to-toe with Aizen for a little bit. And if he didn't lose stamina, if he was still in his prime, Ichigo's dad might have actually won the fight. But at the time, he's in his 40s. He's not in his 20s anymore. So, of course, he's not going to be in peak physical condition. But he puts up a really good fight, which makes me love Ichigo's dad more. I love that character. He's one of the best side characters in the entire story. But I also think, he actually went toe-to-toe for a while against the strongest anime character I've ever seen. No, I don't count Goku. I'm not a DBZ fan. I can't get into that series. But anyway, part of the reason why is because of I knew 1 or 2 annoying DBZ. I knew 1 or 2 people in high school who loved DBZ, and for the most part, they were pretty chill people. Whenever the DBZ topic came up concerning like who would theoretically win in a fight between these pop culture fan favorite characters, the DBZ fans I knew would always say Goku would win hands down. It was that like, but can they literally defeat Goku debate come to life? And I'm like, so this meme is not a parody. It's actually real. It's happening in real time. What's going on here? And you can't reason with that. Even if you're logical to a fault, you can't reason with that. And I know it's a very, very personal reason as to why I won't watch DBZ, but another reason why is because I don't have enough time for a 100 episode series. For being hundreds of episodes long nowadays, unless I've been into it for years. I tried with One Piece, but as soon as I finished the Alabasta arc, I dropped it. I couldn't keep going. And I skipped the filler, so as soon as I finished Alabasta, which is, I think, in the early 200s, I was like, I'm done. I can't. It's been a good run, but I'm not invested enough.
Yeah.
There's too many episodes. I don't got time for that. But yeah, going back to Bleach, Sosuke Aizen is so powerful to the point where it suspends my disbelief, and his master plans are so galaxy brain and convoluted to the point where I'm like, yeah, no, my suspense of disbelief is killed. No, this is too much to take. Like, I know he's a brilliant strategist, but even he has to have limits, right? Like, how could it be that he planned every single little detail to fit his perfect plan when we perfectly realize that there are times where Aizen is actually in danger and it's not going as planned because
yeah, right.
the heroes were able to trick him with the fake Kuratown ploy. And then moreover, Kisuke Urahara, one of Ichigo's mentors, is able to trick him by planting a magic spell on him to render him defeated. Like, Aizen is not as smart as what he pretends to be, but the series wants us to believe that he is. And it gets really annoying after a while. Aizen is a brilliant main villain early in Huecamundo, but by the end, I'm like, I hate this guy. Please kill him. That doesn't happen. Ichigo does defeat Aizen, but he's not killed by Ichigo nor Ichigo's hollow side. Rather, Aizen is suspended from activity completely. He's bound by some kind of magical bondage or whatever, and he's placed in solitary confinement in the Soul Society indefinitely. So he's basically given a life sentence. And well, in a way, that's more torturous than capital punishment because with Aizen and other Soul Reapers, they actually live, as far as I know, perpetually unless they're killed in the series. So it's like a half immortality. But yeah, it gets really annoying with that. And that's one of the annoying character issues that I have. But it's also with the plot. Like, if they shortened the amount of episodes and increased the story beats, along with tweaking the characterization for some of the characters, I think Bleach would have been absolutely amazing. And if it just like stopped after, if Recommendo was shortened to let's say 4 seasons, if Recommendo was shortened to 4 seasons instead of being 7, I think it would have fared way better than what it did. Because there would have been plenty more story beats, but in less. All the story beats would have been condensed in less episodes, which means faster pacing. And it's like, oh dang, this series is so interesting. We're not dragging out the plot. Oh my gosh, I can't wait for the next episode. But when I was watching through Huecamundo, as a kid, I still enjoyed it. But if I were to go back through it again as an adult, I'm like, can I just find an abridged version where it only touches upon the essential scenes and skip the rest? Like, I really don't care about a lot of what's going on episode to episode. And I started to notice it the deeper I got into the series, but I still gave it a pass. But when Fullbringer rolled around, that's where I'm like, yeah, the series has taken a dip. I think Ichigo still develops really nicely in Fullbringer. Like, looking back through the Fullbringer arc and what they did with him, Ichigo actually has a lot of decent character development that gets forgotten. Do his motivations stay relatively the same? Yeah, but Fullbringer is where he arguably grows the most. Because he loses his powers temporarily. Yes, he regains them, and he's able to defeat the Ark boss with them. But for a while, he can no longer see ghosts, whether good ghosts, which are holes, or evil ghosts, which are hollows.
Mm-hmm.
And he's no longer able to see Rukia or Renji or any of his other friends that he made in the Soul Society, in the land of the dead, so to speak. So he no longer has that. And it's like, will I ever see them again? Probably not, and I miss them, but I'm still going to try and protect the ones that I love. And he does. But it's purely physical. And he knows that it's simply not the same. Now, out of the original hero crew, he can still see Orihime, he can still see Chad, and he can still see Ryu. Because they're humans like him. But he can't see Renji nor Rukia. And when two of your friends are separated by that whole afterlife barrier kind of thing, well, it weighs on him, and understandably so. But thankfully he regains his powers. The main villain of the arc is defeated. Everything's fine again. But even though I think Ichigo gets good development, not a lot of the other characters do. And while they are minor characters, and I am more forgiving of poor character development in minor characters than I am the main character, because main character theoretically should have the most airtime. Because of the amount of episodes that Bleach has, I can't help but think there's some missed potential at times.
Right.
Because they have hundreds of episodes to develop the minor characters, but while they do a good job of that in Soul Society, admittedly, I think the world building there too, because of the good character development across the cast, is done well there too. Fullbringer doesn't do the same thing. I think Huecamundo and Fullbringer is where character development takes a sharp dip. And not necessarily for Ichigo, not necessarily for my favorite characters like Rukia and Kisuke. Definitely not Gin either. I love Gin's redemption arc. But it's like, a lot of the minor hero characters, I understand why they're not focused on in Huecamundo, so I'm more forgiving of them. But based on the amount of episodes, it still would have been nice to have them develop a little bit more. I don't remember a lot of what the B-cast heroes did in those episodes. And again, the minor villains, the Espada, outside of like 3 or 4 of them, it's hard to remember. Like, especially characters like Zomari. You know, it's very hard to... He's probably the most forgettable character in the entire series, outside of Ichigo's human friends, who, like, are relevant in Season 1 and then don't matter at all into the future. Yeah, it's the same with the anti-hero group, the Vizards. Like, Shinji's great. I like him. But outside of him, I don't remember anyone else from that group. Well, I remember I remember a couple more characters, like, I forget her name, but Ichigo calls her Snaggletooth. That's her name. She's an annoying tsundere and isn't much more. I mean, okay, that's somewhat unfair to her. She has a tragic backstory like the other Vizards, so when that happens, you are endeared to her a little bit, but she doesn't have a likable personality, and I don't remember if she ever develops out of that. And it's like, okay, another shrill character to add to the pile of shrill characters that I don't like. But I think from the little bit I've seen, the Blood War arc does improve characterization and character development for the minor cast.
That's good.
And actually, Ichigo's backstory is fleshed out even more. So that's a pleasant surprise, where his father is a Soul Reaper. But guess what? It's revealed that his dead mother was a Quincy.
Ooh.
And I didn't learn about that plot twist until last night when I was looking through the plot synopsis of Blood War. I'm like, what? That's like the Union and the Confederates during the American Civil War getting married and having babies.
Yeah.
Like, wow. Ooh. It's like, I love that plot twist. I honestly do. Like, the Kurosaki family has great lore behind them. And I think that was one of the best storytelling moves that Kubo made, where it's like, your father was a Soul Reaper. Your mother was a Quincy. But despite the Soul Reapers and Quincy's fighting for years, a civil war, because of certain Civil War policies and unbalance with souls occurring due to their fighting tactics, despite them killing each other, your father and mother loved each other very much. They did not care about that. They had you, and then they had your sisters.
That's so sweet. So romantic.
Oh, yeah, I know. And this really sets up Ichigo's character well, because he's like, holy crap, my mom was a Quincy? Like, and it's just unloaded on him, and he's, I don't remember all of the panels, I only remember a couple, but he's like absolutely dumbfounded by this. And with how his mom protected him and saved his life from the Grand Fisher Hollow Ghost in the first place, but the Grand Fisher also, if I recall correctly, this Grand Fisher Ghost steals his mom's powers. So, like, that's why Mrs. Kurosaki dies, because her Quincy powers got stolen from her, if I recall correctly. And if that never happened, then she would have lived to tell the tale. And then, of course, Ichigo's dad becomes a widower, a single father, which is extremely hard on everyone. But I think the Holy Blood War arc does a great job of bringing in new plot twists to refreshen Ichigo's character. Because with looking at him early on, he gets really solid character development. In Heroica Mundo and Fullbringer, I still think it's pretty good when you look closer, but because the episodes get so long and there are so many of them, it can feel really dragged out.
Oh my goodness, I cannot proportion. Anyway, go on.
Yeah, and so looking back on it, I think Ichigo's high moments really develop his character super nicely. But you gotta work through the mediocre schlock episodes that don't focus on him. And admittedly, even though I think he's a fairly well-developed character, he's still not my favorite. I think Rukia and Kisuke are objectively better written characters. But Ichigo, after remembering right, he's probably a little underrated concerning development. But his other friends, I mean, Ryu still gets good development. And I like what they do with him in the Holy Blood War. Not Holy Blood War. I'm thinking of the loyal papists in the medieval years now. In the 1,000-Year Blood War arc, it's actually revealed, and I forgot this happened, it's actually revealed Uryu only sided with the Quincy's and the evil side, the evil faction of the Quincy's, in order to infiltrate them and defeat the bad guys from the inside out. So it's set up like he's Breaking Bad and going full villain, but he actually stays a hero the entire time. And he's like, guys, I didn't betray you. I'm actually trying to stop them. And I think that gives him a great moral dilemma. But Chad and Renji, I wouldn't be able to speak for them for the Blood War, so I'm not going to do that. But I don't remember anything relevant that they did during the Hueca Mundo arc. And there's so many episodes of the Hueca Mundo arc, hundreds of them, that I can't help but think, like, this could have been way better executed for their characters. Okay, I will say, Chad gets pretty decent development during Fullbringer. Because he's actually revealed to be part of the Fullbringer group called, I think they're called Execution, but it's without the E. They dropped the E at the beginning of that word. or is it called execution? It's something weird like that, just to sound edgy, you know?
Yeah, that makes sense.
It's like execution is extreme or something like that. But
That's pretty funny.
I think he gets a little time in the spotlight there that he sorely needed. But I can't help but think like approximately half to a third of the entire main hero group gets kind of shafted in Huecamundo. Now I've already said this. I'm not a fan of Orihime's damsel in distress portrayal and how Kubo or the writers in general portrayed it. With Rukia, I think it's more understandable with her because she's caught in, a government conflict that she didn't want to be in. And it sets up for interesting moral dilemmas there. But with Orihime's kidnapping, on the other hand, there's less intrigue. It's like, okay, Ichigo, we're going to kidnap your girlfriend. And if we don't, everyone close to you will be killed off. And it's like, well, okay. I guess I hate having her, like, be kidnapped, but, no matter what, we're going to go in there and we're going to save her. And you already know that they will save her, and that's exactly what happens.
Yeah. I mean,
there is less suspense and intrigue when it comes to Orihime's kidnapping. And the details of it are a little different, I will admit, but the basis of it is the exact same. So it's not going to be as intriguing the second time around, even though there are some details that are unique to the Huecamundo arc that make it a little better than what it could have been.
Yeah. I do think that it's interesting you mentioned, like, you already know what's going to happen, because I see, and I'm not saying you do this, but this reminds me of something. There are a lot of writers who seem to have this idea that if your reader can predict how the book is going to end, that you've written a bad story, and I actually don't agree with that. I think that readers being able to predict at least something about what the ending might be, that's good. That's just good storytelling. Like, you are leaving breadcrumbs for people to follow and stuff like that.
Yeah, definitely. And I would actually argue that being too unpredictable is actually worse. Because
yes, I agree.
Point, like, let's say that there is a shock death that comes out of nowhere.
Ooh.
To a key character, or like you introduce this MacGuffin Deus Ex Machina plot device that powers and levels your character to the point where they're too strong to defeat. You're like, where was this established? Where was this foreshadowed? Like,
yeah,
what is this?
Yeah.
I would actually say being too unpredictable is worse than being too predictable.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that like with because I tell people, there are writers that tell people, like, if you can pinpoint a single story in which a device or a trope or whatever has already been used, then you're writing a cliched story, and they'll tell them to just cut out and, like, completely overhaul their story, and I'm like, no, we inspire one another. That's the whole point of writing, isn't it? And so I don't know. I just think that like, because this was interesting to me, like, I remember saying, like, Shadow Weaver's death kind of came out of nowhere, and a lot of people had predicted she would probably die in some way. I was just one of the people who was desperately hoping that wouldn't be the case. And when it felt like it came out of nowhere, in the sense, not that the fans hadn't predicted it, but that the show itself hadn't seemed to foreshadow that. In fact, I would say if you've seen She-Ra, it foreshadows the exact opposite earlier in the show. But, and, like, people were telling me, well, you weren't supposed to predict the ending. If you would have predicted the ending, it would have been, like, boring or whatever. And I'm like, no, that is the exact problem. I don't want a bad ending just because I can't predict it. Like, that's not good storytelling.
Exactly, because at that point, the plot becomes convoluted. And I actually ran into this in FMA 2003. Thankfully, not the case with Brotherhood. But FMA 2003, there is one scene in episode 50 that I absolutely cannot stand, and the more I rewatch it, the more I hate it. I won't say because of spoilers, because of the weight of it, and I don't want you to make any spoilery guesses related to Brotherhood, even though they do have different endings. But there is a shock death in episode 50 that I absolutely despise and cannot stand, and I hate it the more I rewatch it, because At one point in episode 22, one character says to another, "The only reason why you're still alive is we were told not to kill you." And so that's like, okay, so in ordinary circumstances, this other character would be killed off if this villain person had the ability to do so. But because they were told not to, they will obey that. So you think that they would be safe, right? And if they ever became in danger of said promise being revoked, we would have appropriate foreshadowing of that, right? Wrong. Not in 2003. And along with that, the deal with it is there is another plot point that confuses me because said character who does receive shock death should have actually been used as leverage by the villain in question to achieve their goals, because that easily could have happened and should have happened given what was established about said bad guy in the first place, but that doesn't happen. And said villain allows said character to be killed off, doesn't do anything about it, even though they know that it wouldn't be in their best interest based on how the circumstances occur. And as soon as that happens, another character revives said character, and then the person who allowed said death to happen, who's on the bad guy's side, ends up getting their just desserts. Their plans fail immediately and horribly, and you're like, so, first of all, episode 50 ignores the lore established in episode 22 and says, "Oh, we were told not to kill you, so you won't die." Episode 50, shock death, said character dies. Do they get resurrected a minute later? Yes. But does such still happen? Yes. And
That's the
it's
problem.
absolutely frustrating.
Well, that's the problem, is like you can't just revive characters immediately unless there's some sort of like symbolic meaning behind their resurrection in a story. Now, obviously, if God is at play, obviously you can resurrect characters, but it has, again, you have to do what is best for the story. So like I don't like when, for example, this is a problem I have with Marvel, and I'm not going to get into why I'm not an MCU fan, because I hate crapping on things that other people enjoy. But I will say one thing that baffles me about the MCU is the fact that they just bring back characters. And now granted, I have not seen all of the MCU, so I should probably watch the entirety of the MCU before I criticize it. There's an ant behind the camera. But I just don't like how they just bring back characters. I don't know. I'm just like, yeah, I like this character, but I'm like, death has to mean something, you know what I mean? So, I don't know. But
yeah. I will say that said shock death does mean something for the characters in question. So, I would say in FMA 2003, well, I do think it's a far weaker ending than the Brotherhood ending. I will say, based on what transpires in episodes 50 and 51, they do keep with a couple themes really well. So, said death of character and resurrection of said character that I can't say for spoilery reasons, it is played off in a way in which some of the themes are respected with it. So it's not all bad, but honestly, for the most part, it's just for shock value, especially when episode 22 through dialogue promised that said thing wouldn't happen, and the viewer receives a little foreshadowing as to otherwise that said promise would be broken, and it wouldn't be in the best interest of other characters for it to do so.
right.
And concerning the characters who are setting this up, they're established as being brilliant planners, so you would think again that it wouldn't happen, but then it happens anyway. And I'm like, this death was just for shock value. That character resurrects, which I'm pleased with, but it's just for shock value. Episode 50 is an F tier, and it is my most hated episode of FMA 2003. I hate it more than the Pure Film episode 4. I hate it more than episode 26, when the main character's girlfriend at the time gets crapped on concerning characterization. I hate it more than both of them. I hate it more than the other filler episodes. Episode 50 is the worst episode of the series. And it's not just for the shock value stuff, it's also because there are a bunch of plot points that are established that don't receive their just desserts, their due justice. concerning being explained properly.
Hmm.
And
I understand.
I,
Yeah. Go
I
ahead.
think with FMA 2003, despite veering off the original manga, I think for the most part it actually tells a darn good original story. I think season 1 is good, and I honestly think seasons 2 and 3 are amazing storytelling. Even with the flaws on occasion in parts 2 and 3 of FMA 2003, there are still plenty of highs to the point where I'm like, this is one of the best shows that I've ever seen. But season 4 gets really weird, and Conqueror of Shambhala is not much better than that. And I'm like, if the writers were more patient, if they flushed some more things out with the plot, and if they tweaked characterization a little bit, I would love Brotherhood. No. I would love 2003 just as much as I love Brotherhood. But that's not the case. 2003, in my opinion, is worth it to watch. But even though there's been some revisionist history going on the YouTube anime reviewer community lately, the ending of 2003 is not good. Whether you count episode 51 as being the ending or Conqueror of Shambhala. And being real, the true ending of the series is Conqueror of Shambhala. And most everyone feels mixed on that. It's not the worst ending to a show I've ever seen, but it's got a bunch of question marks and issues that make it less satisfactory than what it could have been.
Yeah.
And like there are people out there who will say that the ending of FMA 2003 is perfect. No, it's not perfect. It's not brilliant either.
Yeah.
I found it to be convoluted and too open-ended for my tastes. And if people like open-ended style endings, that's fine. But the amount of lingering plot threads that are left unresolved, that's where it bothers me. You can have an open-ended story, but still cover and finish up all of the key major plot lines. But 2003, in my opinion, definitely doesn't do that.
Undertale pulled off the open-ended thing pretty well, I would say.
Oh yeah, they did it well. And I would actually argue that Brotherhood does the open-ended ending well, where you could see a fanfic writer making a short sequel about the characters in the future, but like, unlike 2003, all of Brotherhood's major story arcs are completed and fleshed out. There are no lingering big questions left. There are small ones. And it's like, hey, awesome. I love the ending. It's perfect. But when you look at 2003, it's like, wait, what about this? What about that? What about this? What about that? Ugh.
Yeah.
And then Conqueror of Shambhala answers a few of those questions, which is good. But there are a few like secondary protagonist characters that I wish got more fleshing out. And thankfully Brotherhood exists because they do get their justice in Brotherhood. But 2003, even though I think the main protagonist, Edward, is actually maybe even slightly better written in 2003 than what he is in Brotherhood, on the other hand, pretty much everyone else is better written in Brotherhood than they are in 2003. And it's mainly because of Part 4 and Conqueror of Shambhala just not giving the characters enough time to be flashed out and being too quickly paced. That's the thing. It's convoluted and too fast.
Yeah, I definitely felt... Okay, let me see that.
Now, I will say, I don't want this to turn into an FMA 2003 hate session because I actually really like the show.
Yeah.
I would give it a solid 8 out of 10 at minimum, maybe even a 9 on a good day. But even though Part 1 is really solid, and Parts 2 and 3 are great, Part 4 and Conqueror of Shambhala, especially because they're the ending sections of the story, just really rub me the wrong way.
Yeah, I understand that. I was gonna say, the whole death thing with the character being promised, like, writing... I heard from Brandon Sanderson, who I really look up to as a writer. He's more of a planner than I am, but I still He's still a good resource that I refer to a lot. He says that writing is about promises. So basically, like, if you set something up, which is ultimately it's determined by your audience, you know, because if your audience is expecting something to happen, like the majority of your audience, like, you have set something up and you should deliver on that. I felt like Shira also didn't do that with Shadow Weaver, and that reminds me of what you said about this character who had that shock death, you know. And it's like, yeah, it doesn't matter if they were revived; it's still a problem. My issue with Shadow Weaver is that she actually was brought back from the brink of death, and it was clearly, I will debate anybody on this. It was clearly a foreshadowing of redemption. Like, there's no way you can argue that. But the problem is that they then kill her off. Like, they actually do the death, and not only that, she ends up throwing her own life away after it was given back to her. That was a huge problem for me. But yeah.
That is really big. Yeah. And with said character, which I won't name the name
Yeah.
for obvious reasons, like, they do a thing where it's kind of a sacrifice, but they end up living on because they realize that they'll live on. And they know it's the right call because they need to be there for that other person one day that they care about. So with said character, they're at worse, especially since they stay alive. It's just that they're moved to a different position in their life. Again, I can't say exactly where because of spoilers, but anyone who's watching this who's seen FMA 03 will understand what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
But that's the thing. With egging on Joy to watch Brotherhood with me, FMA Brotherhood is my favorite TV show of all time. I would say it's even technically more perfect or better than stuff like Breaking Bad or Avatar: The Last Airbender, like other award-winning shows like that.
That is very high praise considering, like, everybody likes Avatar. I've met very few people. Now, I will say Avatar is not a perfect series, and I don't like people pretending that it is, because it does have some really key flaws, but it also doesn't do anything that's, like, horrifically bad and ruins the story or anything like that. So, that's good.
Definitely. And with, again, as a final note of 2003, I still like that series. Would I give it a perfect 10 out of 10? No. But I would give it an 8 at a minimum, and probably even a 9 on a good day, because it does a lot of things right.
Yeah.
But again, Season 4 and Conqueror Shambhala have a buttload of issues. If it weren't for that, and if all of the minor characterizations were fixed, and if the filler was cut, or at the very least weaved into the main plot better, I would have given the series a perfect 10 out of 10 as well, because I like a lot of what they do. But because, again, of the shoddy ending, and you can't debate me on that, the shoddy ending is a shoddy ending. It's not secretly good or secretly brilliant, or, like, just because it's open-ended doesn't mean that it's more philosophically meaningful or anything deep like that. No. The ending is not what it should have been. While Brotherhood's ending is what it should have been. And I will admit that the early game of 2003 is just as good as the early game of Brotherhood, maybe even slightly better in some episodes. But once you reach the halfway point, Brotherhood surpasses it. Even though I will say, again, Season 1 of 2003 is probably better than Season 1 of Brotherhood. I will admit that, because Brotherhood's plot pacing is a little too fast for my liking with Season 1. And Joy, you'll see this, and we could talk about that and what your feelings on it when we go through it together. Because, like, Season 1 does a lot of things right. I like how, with Brotherhood, Season 1, it introduces all of the main characters immediately, which I didn't like that at first because it didn't follow the slower pacing of the manga. But I've actually warmed up to it over the years, and I now find Episode 1 of Brotherhood to be probably the most underrated episode of Brotherhood, because people don't like it because it introduces the characters really quickly. And while some say,
what's wrong with that?
Okay, the reason why is because people will say, readers and watchers have already seen 2003 and the original manga, so people will know who they are. And that's why the producers decided to quicken the pace of part one of the story a little more compared to the original manga and Brotherhood. And that's why episode one introduces all the main characters at once instead of doing it across 3 or 4 episodes, like what happens in 2003 and the original manga, which it's only a problem on the surface. When you pay attention to episode one, and I've become an episode one of Brotherhood apologist, episode one does a surprisingly masterful job of explaining all at once who the characters are through clever storytelling, dialogue, and jokes. It gets like the balance of comedy and drama pretty well, and you already feel like you know who those people are and what they're going to be about just by seeing a couple scenes with them. So it sets up characterization really well in a quick and effective manner. And it also does a great job of foreshadowing what is to come later in the story. Like, episode one of Brotherhood is secretly solid. And I don't have any problems with it.
Yeah. She-Ra takes a little bit of time to get, like, super good. I will say, there are no bad episodes of She-Ra, as in, like, episodes where, like, you're just like, this episode doesn't need to be there, or this episode is just unbearable to watch. There's none of that in there, I would say. I would give She-Ra overall, I can't narrow it down to a number because the series is so good, and yet it does so many things wrong, like, at the very end, that I'm like, that affects what I think a lot. But overall, like, all of the episodes I would say are watchable. It's just some of them get very strange, you know? Especially in late season 5, which is the final season of the show. Oh, man. I have ranted about that for over an hour, so I'm going to do a shameless plug right now. If you want to hear me rant more about Shadow Weaver, you can go and watch my big long YouTube playlist that I did a while ago. I recorded myself ranting about it. So, I always give that video series to people because I've talked about it so many times. But yeah, I would say that She-Ra is actually, I would say it's an 8 out of 10. Because the final season, while it does have significant story problems with pretty much every character, it is still a fun season to watch, and it has a lot of stuff going for it. So I don't think it's a bad show by any means. I think that some people think, like, after season 5 that I just ended up hating the show. No, I love the show so much that I wanted it to get the ending it deserved, you know? And the ending, like, the main ending, as in, like, if you summarize everything that happened in the finale, is actually very good. It's just they messed up in these very important key areas, and that's what I have such a problem with, you know? But the problems with Adora and her family are just, as far as, like, literary issues, I mean, obviously they're dysfunctional, but, like, the literary issues are they drag the show down to a level I didn't even know She-Ra was capable of, and that is not something I usually say, even if I didn't like the show. Because Kipo and the Age of Wonder Beasts, I watch a lot of cartoons that aren't animes, so Kipo and the Age of Wonder Beasts also had a similar ending to Shadow Weaver. It was less overtly suicidal, but it still felt off because one of the villains, I'm not going to go into spoilers, but one of the villains did get redeemed, but their arc was sidelined for the last season, I think because Netflix has a problem with not giving creators enough seasons to develop their story properly. I definitely have noticed that with several shows I've gotten into recently, where it's just like, it's not bad, but it's not nearly as good as it could have been. And then he said, like, thank you for being a family one last time. And then he went and, like, dive bombed the enemy and got himself killed. And I was just like, well, that was an ending. But I don't think it dragged Kipo down to an unbearable level because the overall thesis remained intact, kind of. But with She-Ra, I felt like the combination of having sisters, and they were adoptive sisters, that is not homophobic to say, That is just a fact. They were sisters. Look up the definition of a ward. They were sisters. I have to... Sorry, I'm not saying this to you. I'm saying this to people who are going to be watching and accusing me of being homophobic because I don't ship Catra and Adora.
No, I think it's fine.
But yeah, so, like, I don't like the idea of sisters, one of whom was abusing the other, getting together. Call me whatever you want. I just have a problem with it. And that combined with Shadow Weaver, like, killing herself, which that is exactly what it was, and the show itself even frames it that way. It's just, like, I felt like all the themes about love and forgiveness and, like, acceptance and mental health and redemption, they were all just lip service. And as I saw the creators' comments, and again, I don't have anything against N.D. Stevenson or anything like that. I have no problem with that. Also, if I use the dead name, I'm sorry. I am a human. But whenever she was talking about it, I was just like, the entire time I was just like, oh yeah, this was totally lip service. Why did I ever think that it wasn't? And then I went back and I realized, like, it's been lip service for a very long time, because the show isn't actually about love and forgiveness. It's about deserving redemption, which, again, as we've said before, that is a nonsense phrase. That does not make sense. It is not. Correct. That does not compute with Joy's mind, and it shouldn't with yours either. So, yeah. I don't know. I do understand, like, characters that were promised by the show not to be killed off, and then they get killed off anyway. Like, that's ridiculous, especially when they're resurrected. And it's clearly said in the show that this is an act of grace, and that it is an opportunity for her to change. I mean, like, Adora has a whole conversation with her friends before saving Shadow Weaver from the brink of death of, like, I want to heal her because who knows, she might change if she's healed and stuff. You know what I mean? And so it's just like, that was just like such a... I don't want to just say it was godless, because people who aren't Christians are going to understand. It was like an evil ending, I will say. And I don't call ending... I believe so greatly in creative freedom that I very rarely call an ending evil, but I think that this is an apt descriptor for She-Ra. So... yeah.
Yeah. I would say with my own series that I love but still rant about with FMAO3, I wouldn't say it sinks to that level where it's like, oh, I didn't think the show was capable of
Hello, Isis.
To this level. Hi, Iris.
It's Isis, like the Egyptian goddess.
I'm sorry.
Iris. Sorry. You're good.
Yeah, like with FMAO3, I wouldn't say that it sinks to a level where it's like, I didn't know that they could sink that low. I wouldn't say that about 2003's ending, but I still find it underwhelming because there are a bunch of plot points that should have received more development that didn't. And some of that's fixed by Conqueror of Shambhala, but only a little bit of it. And it's like, okay, well, on the other hand, the progression's flip-flopped with Brotherhood. Like, Episode 1 is underrated. It does a great job of introducing all the important characters at once. It feels like you already know them. So it's masterclass not only in characterization, but also the acting. The dub is fantastic, which we will be watching over the original Japanese. But concerning season one being a little too fast, you start to feel it with episode 2, because the Elric backstory is shoved into one episode, at least, well, okay, that's not fair to Brotherhood. With looking at Brotherhood, there are bits and pieces of the Elric brother backstory shown throughout the story, but the key backstory episode is episode 2. On the other hand, 2003 spends multiple episodes, like 3, 4, even 5 episodes, just developing the Elrics and who they were before the present day. The Brotherhood basically takes all that and shoves it into one episode with episode 2, and I'm like, the backstory still feels tragic, but it's not... I hope she's okay.
Oh, she's fine. She might be having connection issues. Isis has a very busy life. She's like a child prodigy. I'm not even kidding.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, she knows like 5 languages, and she does like a ton of sports, and she goes to a STEM specialist school. Like, seriously, the girl is she is a prodigy. So, yeah. Anyway, go on.
Okay, neat. Yeah, but with FMA Brotherhood, like, it's the opposite trajectory where Brotherhood still starts out good, but similar to Avatar: The Last Airbender, it is the water book of Brotherhood. Like,
Oh
one
man,
thing,
but the water book
one
was
thing.
hard to get through for me.
Okay, no. Hold on. I'm not done. I'm not finished.
Sorry.
Um, water book is weaker than Brotherhood season 1
Oh yeah.
concerning quality. I think with comparing the two, both of them get a lot of things right, but the thing that Waterbook suffers from is that there is some filler mixed in there.
Yeah.
Brotherhood does not have filler. It
That's
doesn't.
that's amazing. I love that.
Whenever you see a scene, it's vital to the story. You have to pay very close attention all the time in order to keep up. The only time where that's not the case is roughly half of episode 27, which is called Interlude Party. There is a little bit of a clip show in there. However, it's saved by the fact that said clip show is through Hohenheim's perspective, not Edward's perspective. And that's very key for Hohenheim's character development. So, is episode 27 the worst episode of Brotherhood? Yes. But is it still good? Surprisingly, yes.
Yeah, it's like it's kind of like Shira in that sense, because Shira doesn't have any bad episodes, but I definitely have a least favorite episode that I skip on rewatch. So, yeah. Anyway, go on. Sorry.
Yeah, so I would rate episode 27 of Brotherhood Interlude Party at a 7 out of 10. That is the worst rating that I would get any episode of Brotherhood. While contrasting with it with 2003, I would give episode 50 probably a 3 out of 10.
Oh, wow.
It's only saved from my bottom tier ratings of 2 and 1, if only because the animation is downright great. That's the only thing and the great voice acting. It's like all aesthetics.
Yeah.
Like the aesthetics save episode 50 from being at a 2 or worse. And then episode 4 is at like a 3 as well. Episode 26 is probably a 4. I don't think it's as bad as episodes 450 of 2003, but it's like, ugh, this sucks.
Yeah.
But anyway, with looking at Brotherhood, episode 1 is underrated. I love that one. I didn't used to like it, but now I do. I think it deserves more praise than what it receives. Episode 2, though, even though the tragic backstory of the Elrics is still acted out well, and you can still follow what's going on, because it's all squeezed into one episode, you don't relate to the characters as much as what you could have, in my opinion.
I could see
Not
that.
like in 2003. In Brotherhood, you still relate to Ed's plight very early on. You still feel terribly for him. But Alphonse, on the other hand, you don't really get his angst and terrible feelings about what occurred until a little later in season 1. So Ed still gets great character development from the start. I wouldn't say it's as strong as his 2003 counterpart, but it should still satisfy you.
Yeah.
But Brotherhood Al, on the other hand, well, he starts out more significantly slower than 2003 Al. But by the end of it, 2003 Al is way worse off than Brotherhood Al. So Brotherhood Al has amazing development and gets better and better quickly throughout the series, while 2003 Al starts out really hot and is consistently good until part 4, in my opinion, where he kind of becomes a story prop to further Ed's characterization.
Oh,
which,
that's
good
annoying.
for Ed, bad for Al.
Yeah.
But anyway, Brotherhood starts to show the plot pacing being a little too fast with episode 2. I think it would have been better to... It's basically split into 2 halves. The tragedy of what the Elric brothers went through before the series starts is basically the first half of episode 2, and then the alchemy training that Ed goes through is basically the second half of episode 2, which in itself, it still shows the tragic backstory pretty well. but it's not as good as 2003's. And you think that there's missed potential there if you have seen 2003 like me. And even then, even if you haven't seen it, you might think that it develops a little too fast. So, what would have been best is if the Elric brother tragedy was isolated into one episode, and then Ed's alchemy training took up episode 3. And then that would mean that the Lior incident would be restricted to episode 4 instead of episode 3. That means that Brotherhood would be 65 episodes instead of 64 as it stands. But that's to start. But after Lior, the plot pacing slows down a little bit. It gets better, and you start to relate to the characters a little better. But then there is another episode I would have included in Brotherhood Part 1, which would be about a town called Usewell. I would have inserted a Usewell episode 2, because there's a scene later in the story that introduces a character called Yoki, and he should have received the development that he needed in Brotherhood, but he didn't. And his backstory is instead restricted to a 3-minute flashback, not even 3 minutes, a 2-minute flashback instead of a full episode like in the original manga in 2003. So what I would have done is I would have had a Usewell episode in between Lior and the Nina incident, which I am not going to get into either for spoilery reasons. But if that was included, then part 1 would have been 2 episodes longer. And at that point, I would have said, okay, now the plot pacing is good enough and satisfying enough for me to be fine with it. But 2 episodes, in my opinion, are missing from part 1, and thus Brotherhood should have been 66 episodes long, not 64. I still think season 1 of Brotherhood is good. It doesn't have filler. The characters are likable and even funny. There's a lot of slapstick, like, pee your pants comedy. Like, I've laughed really hard at part 1 of Brotherhood. It's pretty incredible. But the plot pacing is a little too fast. It does slow down towards the end of season 1, like when Edward and one of his friends and military comrades, Armstrong, they end up meeting this guy called Tim Marco. That point in season 1 is where the plot pacing actually gets a little slow and starts to come into its own. I think that's in episode 7 or 8, around there. And season 1 lasts from episodes 1 to 14 in total. So that's about halfway through season 1. I would say there the plot pacing is good again, and that's where the show really starts to come into its own. I would say episodes 1 through 7, they're still good, but the one key issue I have is that the plot pacing's a little too fast at times. It gets too fast sometimes. But I would still say that part 1 of Brotherhood is better than part 1 of Avatar: The Last Airbender.
Yeah.
Because the characters, in my opinion, are more well fleshed out, and the acting is great in both series, but I would argue it's slightly better in Brotherhood. So that's something of note. And the
child
story,
actors,
in my opinion, is deeper and more intriguing in Brotherhood.
The child actors can be hard to get to act right. Like, there are very few super good child actors. I don't know if Atla had that. I don't really know much about its production process. But I do think that Atla has some key flaws, as I said. Aang doesn't actually really have a character arc. He has a character struggle near the end of the series, and like he struggles episodically with, the pressure to save the world as a pacifistic monk, but you never really see him grow or change very much. And it's not like every main character has to have some grand change, but what am I saying? I think that the problem is that Aang is in this moral dilemma toward the end, especially with, he's like, everybody wants him to kill the Fire Lord, but he can't kill the Fire Lord because he's an air nomad. but instead of like him having to actually struggle through that, like is it a lion turtle? It's been so long since I've seen that series. It just gives him a way out. You know what I mean? Instead of him having to earn it.
Exactly right.
What?
You are exactly right. That's exactly what happens.
That's my one big problem with Atla. I know that the first season is a little bit rough starting out, but like lots of shows that I consider to be like top notch as far as like they're not perfect because no story is perfect, but they don't do anything horribly wrong. Atla would like, you know, they have rough first seasons, so that does not surprise me.
Yeah. Like, I wouldn't say Brotherhood's first season is rough, or first part, more accurately, but it is definitely weaker than the rest of the show. Like, parts 2 through 5, in my opinion, are 10 out of 10 television. I have virtually no complaints at all. And even if I do have complaints about those, they're nitpicks. Like, I literally don't care enough about any flaws in parts 2 through 5, because 1, they're really small, and 2, I can't find anything worth complaining about in parts 2 through 5 of Brotherhood. But part 1, it should have been a couple episodes longer. And I would say that it starts out better than Water Book does.
Yeah.
But I will say, you will hopefully be satisfied with Ed's arc, because Ed has a great moment at the end of his arc that I can't say, but it really encapsulates the theme of putting aside your pride and becoming a more humble person. I can't exactly say what, because spoilers, but I hope it will satisfy you.
Yeah.
Because as soon as I finished the manga the first time and read what he does, I was like, you know what? This might be the greatest story I've ever read. I seriously thought that when I first finished the original manga. And lo and behold, FMA Brotherhood is my favorite TV show of all time, and the original manga is my favorite manga and actually fictional series of all time in general.
Yeah, go ahead.
It hasn't changed since I was in high school.
Yeah, I definitely feel like that was actually the primary issue with Shira, putting aside the author's biases, because listen, I probably would have been still teed off about Shadow Weaver, but the last season kind of appalled me the more I watched it several times afterward, because I thought at first there was something wrong with me, like that I was putting stuff onto the text that wasn't actually meant to be there, by being upset about how Shadow Weaver's arc went. But as I watched I realized the season is flawed in so many areas that I'm like, yeah, I don't like the 5th season very much. I like individual episodes of it. I think some of the episodes, especially with Katra's arc, are really good, although her arc isn't very good either. It's too soft on her when she was very abusive as well. But, I mean, on the one hand, at least she didn't end up dying, so that's good. But yeah, so I think also that Shira would have been way better if it had like one more season, I would say. So like that would be another 13 episodes. But the problem is that like the big bad shows up, and then you only have 13 episodes to wrap up like defeating him and giving all the characters arcs, and so they had to sacrifice like the quality of pretty much all the villains, and that was really upsetting to me, I felt like. So
that's a shame. I hope you don't run into the same with Brotherhood, because
I doubt I will.
Every single Brotherhood character is pretty much fleshed out as much as they needed to be, with the exception of, I'll name 2. Yoki, because I believe Yuzwell should have been included, but it's barely there. And May has a good arc overall concerning her backstory and her motivations, but she can be annoying to watch at times. Like, I don't hate her, because objectively concerning her story, she's well written, but her personality can get a little grating, so you have to be patient with her.
Yeah, that's fine.
She does mature a a lot in part 5, but like parts 2 through 3 especially, and on occasion in part 4, but especially parts 2 through 3, I'm like, I don't like May. Ugh, I wish she'd just go away, please. But then in part 5, I'm like, oh, May's cool now.
The
I
main
like
character
her.
of Sailor Moon is objectively freaking annoying, but I love her anyway, so I think I'll be fine. And you have not seen Sailor Moon's Viz dub, or else you would understand exactly where I am coming from with this. But
Yeah, like Sailor Moon intrigues me, but
it is a very girly show. I don't think that you would like it personally, but obviously
yeah.
you might want to you can always try it out. She-Ra, on the other hand, while it does have a more feminine bent and most of the characters are female, like I think that She-Ra can be enjoyed by anybody personally.
Oh yeah, I mean, if it has like fun characters and deep themes, I'll still be willing to give it a try. Like,
Yeah,
apparently everyone likes the original Powerpuff Girls, and
I've never watched that in
well,
my life.
here's the thing. Even though on the surface level it seems like a very girly show, with the original Powerpuff Girls, I'm like, I would actually put this on my potential watch list.
Aw.
I'm not sure what my friend group or family would think, but I would consider it.
Who cares what they think? Watch what makes you happy. But anyway, what I
I
was
just haven't gotten around to it.
yeah,
I've been busy with other stuff like writing and my job, especially, and
adulting.
rewatching FMA 2003 again, and I'm gonna rewatch Brotherhood again.
Yeah, but Sailor Moon I would say is a good slice of life show, but if you're not how do I put this? If you're not versed in teenage girl culture, like there are so many jokes about teenage girl culture in there, and people are just like, "Oh, you're being sexist and ageist." No, it is a very accurate representation of teen girl culture. But if you're not familiar with that, a lot of the jokes will probably fly over your head. And I would say, while the plot is good and the character development is good, they don't carry the show enough on their own, in my opinion. So I would say like you can try it out, but if you don't like it, that's not the show's fault. Or your fault. It's just like a preference thing, I would say. But She-Ra is She-Ra's a dramedy about like a war between an alien conqueror and a planet that's a planet that's like the last planet in the universe with magic. That one has a very interesting premise and very, very interesting characters. It's just the last season kind of it's underwhelming. That's all. That's what I'll say. I won't say the last season is necessarily bad. Wait, that I'm not drawing. Who am I drawing right now? I'm not drawing Angela. Why did I start drawing Angela? Anyway, but like
the last season is underwhelming, and you have to be wary of that.
Yeah, but I would say that I'm in the minority in saying that it was like overall not good. A lot of people on this server will agree that at the very least Catra and Adora's the conclusion to their arc, and then Shadow Weaver's death were low points. But not all of them would agree that this season is bad in other ways. I would say that it has some pretty key issues with character arcs, but the show is pretty much always a fun time. And it does explore some themes that actually carry very well into the ending. It's not a bad show by any means. I'm just extremely salty about those two aspects of it. The other parts I'm like, yeah, this is a flaw, but it's not like an unforgivable one and stuff like that. So it is a really good show, and it's definitely falling into like the dramedy genre, if that makes sense. Like, but it also knows how to use its tone properly, and I think that it does a lot with that. So
I love dramedy. I mean, FMA Brotherhood is my favorite show, as I've said before, like a broken record many times. And one of the reasons why is because I personally like how they handle humorous moments. Now, there is a civil war within the FMA fan base between Brotherhood enjoyers and FMA 2003 enjoyers, where I've heard it said from 2003 loyalists that Brotherhood is worse because it's too funny and the humor happens at inopportune times, and thus Brotherhood sucks.
Oh, that's
That is
silly.
a simple. That is a simplification, and that is only looking at the vocal minority. The majority of FMA 2003 enjoyers that prefer it don't hate Brotherhood, but I have heard that complaint in general. And here's the thing: one might argue that in bits and pieces in part one, but it's only in bits and pieces. And during the most serious of the serious, it never crosses that line of being too quick and tonal shifting when it matters most. If a
Yeah.
scene is somewhat, if a scene is somewhat serious, it will shift tone pretty quickly. But if it's super serious when it's at the lowest low, it will not cross that line. So honestly, I forgive it for that. And secondly, one thing I noticed during my previous rewatches of both shows is that Brotherhood does a brilliant job of decreasing the amount of humor the deeper you get into the show.
Yeah,
Part
that's the
one
same with
is
Shira.
Part one is very funny and is filled with a lot of wholesome comedy, and it's a good time. Even with the plenty of serious moments and the tragic backstories and all of that stuff, and setting up the main villain and his plan, which the main villain's revealed at the end of season one. With looking at the comedy, there are a lot of die-hard funny, comedic, and slapsticky moments in part one. But then you contrast it with part five, where the end game occurs. Part five is like
Yeah.
all end game in FMA Brotherhood. It takes place across 24 hours. It's kind of insane. And when you look at that, I only recall like a single comedic moment or joke from part slash season five, like one. And it's from episode 55, where like Ed and another character named Scar get into like a bit of an argument where it's played up for laughs, but it's like brief, and that's it. Like everything else in part five is like intense drama and action, and like anyone could die at any given moment.
Oh yeah,
You
Shira
just
doesn't
don't
get that
know,
dark.
just don't know when. And I love how it starts out being funny and lighthearted, even with the intense drama and tragedy in part one. It starts out being comedic overall, but then shifts to being more dramatic overall by part five. Like the ending, the final season is intense. You won't have a lot of laughs, and you'll be on the edge of your seat. But with 2003, there is less comedy overall. But one thing I found strange and hypocritical from said vocal minority of the 2003 side of the fan base, again, vocal minority, it's only a couple people that have done this. But from what I've heard, one of the strangest complaints I've heard is that apparently 2003's handling of tone is better because there's less humor. That's only looking at it from a very surface level and shallow part, because while I would say the jokes in 2003 are cleverer or drier in humor compared to Brotherhood is more wet, meaning slapsticky and open.
Oh,
um
I love slapstick.
yeah, like 2003 is less slapsticky, it's more dry and witty. But one thing I noticed recently with my rewatch is that comedic moments are evenly spread throughout the series. Like, episode 50 is the only one that doesn't have any humor in it, and for good reason. But, like, episodes 1 through 49 and 51, along with Conqueror of Shambhala to a degree, well, not as much Conqueror of Shambhala, episodes 1 through 49 have comedy pretty evenly spread throughout. Like, I was chuckling pretty frequently throughout, and I was like, well, in itself, that's not bad, but I honestly prefer Brotherhood's style of handling humor because it gradually decreases in frequency over time to indicate that things are getting more intense, and that's a very logical direction. But when you look at 2003, on the other hand, it may have less jokes, which it does. It has less joking than Brotherhood. And for more serious people, maybe that fits their taste, and that's fine. But when you're looking at how there are plenty of jokes, well, not plenty, there are enough jokes to get you through to basically achieve your comedy satisfaction in episodes 1 through 49, it's pretty evenly spread throughout 1 through 49. And then you hit episode 50, and there is no comedy in that episode whatsoever. And it's like, whoa, what happened? It's like I'm watching an entirely different show. And when you're looking at the aesthetical side of 2003, it's a little jarring.
Yeah, I can understand that for sure.
Yeah. I'm gonna be right back. I need to check on laundry.
Yay. Laundry. My sister's probably actually gonna watch this video.
Gotta dry off my clothes.
Yeah. Yeah, so I definitely think, I definitely understand the humor. People say that She-Ra has a hard time with tone, which I don't agree with. I actually think that She-Ra has a very good handle on its tone. Although I will say that, okay, so She-Ra is a show made by people who, I'm trying to think of a way to say this that isn't offensive. They're very concerned with diversity and inclusion, which is a good thing. Okay, it's good to have different types of people in your stories because there are different types of people in real life. All that, good. That said, so they have an autistic character. As an autistic person, I am tired of being represented by a white boy. Not that being white is bad, but like by a white boy who can't walk or talk and enjoys playing with trains. Like that is what autistic representation is reduced to a lot of the time. But they have a character who is autistic, and she is written incredibly well. I will not get into her arc because that is one of the best parts of the show, and I want you to save it for if you actually watch it. But I do really, really like her character. The problem is that they make some jokes that feel like they're taking shots at her for her autism. And her arc, while I like her arc in seasons 1 through 4, it takes a strange direction in season 5. So I can explain a little bit of it. So basically, Entrapta's an engineer. She's a brilliant engineer. And she is not very much liked by the good guys because she gets distracted. She's a lot like me. So like if you take my most annoying qualities and put them in a character, that's what the rebellion doesn't like about Entrapta. But like, so basically, she has a problem with getting distracted on missions, and the show, it is so strange because on the one hand, they will say, like, Entrapta's autistic, this is a good thing, but then they don't condemn the characters explicitly enough or, like, obviously enough, if that makes sense, and it feels almost like they're affirming their stigma toward her. Let me give you an example. So, Entrapta has a problem. Yeah,
I follow.
Yeah, Entrapta has an obsession with technology because she's an engineer, and the Horde, the bad guys, they're filled with technology because the leader of the Horde is a brilliant engineer as well, and they actually end up having a really sweet romance and stuff. It's adorable. But like but the thing is that they have a mission to do. They go to the Horde's quarters and they can't get distracted looking at tech. The problem is, instead of the others sitting down with Entrapta, who is the oldest princess, she is an adult. She's the only adult princess. And instead of sitting her down and saying, hey, we think that your skills would be better used somewhere else where you won't get distracted and end up getting yourself or others killed, they put her on a leash. And this is a real problem for me. I am not against I'm not against getting help for distractions. I'm not of the mind that just because you have autism that you get to act however you want and use that as an excuse to like act in ways that hurt other people. I don't think that that's right. I think that's silly, and people who do think that need to seriously do some soul searching, because that's going to make us people understand us less. But instead of like treating her like an adult, they kind of infantilize her and place her on a leash instead of saying, "Hey, Entrapta, do you mind like working on some gadgets for us to take on our next mission and stuff like that?" It is a very confusing choice, and I wouldn't let me tell you this. I would have absolutely no issue with this being in the show if those characters had been shown at any point that Entrapta was not worth getting upset over, if that makes sense. Like, I understand where they're coming from, but their mindset just isn't correct, and it's not good. And so I would have really liked a scene where, like, the princesses had talked to Entrapta, and they're like, "Hey, we know you get distracted easily, but here are some things that you can do that will be best suited for your strengths and weaknesses." Instead, and it's framed in the 5th season as Entrapta needing to change how she, like, Entrapta has to force herself to concentrate and, like, remember her friends, which I don't really like, because it's just, like, her arc is about, like, and what her story ultimately sends to the audience. And I don't believe this was intentional, so I'm not mad about it per se, and I still think she has really valuable things to say in her arc. But the ultimate message I was getting from one of the episodes in the 5th season was, like, yes, autistic people are empathetic too, even though they don't seem like it, which I'm not a fan of. It is true that some autistic people have a lowered empathy, but actually a lot of us have a higher empathy. So I'm not really a fan of the idea that Entrapta's arc is about her actually learning to care for people, because, like, she does care for people. She just joined the bad guys because the good guys were so mean and ostracizing to her, you know? So I have some problems with how her arc is handled, but she herself is excellent autism rep, like, excellent. Which I'm not one of those people who gets triggered easily. And so, like, some people would say, like, they exaggerate some of her traits, and I'm like, yeah, of course they do, because this is a dramedy. Like, I have no problem with people exaggerating autistic traits in a dramedy, as long as that's the common understanding, you know what I mean? I have no problem with that. The problem is that the show doesn't realize when its tone needs to be more serious about a given issue, and when it needs to drop the dramedy act for an actual character moment, I guess. So yeah, that's my main problem with her, but overall her arc is extremely good. I would say that I think that part of the reason they felt like they had to take her arc in that strange direction was because her arc of self-acceptance and like finding that love, because the leader of the Horde, he's an alien, and they have much different social norms. So obviously, like, he's not literally autistic, but a lot of people read him as, like, an allegory for autism. So, like, it's really sweet how she could find love with somebody who actually understands her and all that stuff. My problem is that sometimes it veers too much into a Entrapta, you have to change yourself or else the future of the world is at stake and stuff, which I'm like, no, you could also just put her in a place where she will do better with her strengths and weaknesses, which is how that works in real life. Everybody has strengths and weaknesses, in fact, and that's not an autism exclusive thing. So I don't get why you're portraying it as her needing to and I'm not saying they wanted her to fundamentally change herself. That's too extreme. I just mean, like, you can't, for example, with the focus issues. I have ADHD as well, but even if I did, autism also causes severe concentration issues sometimes. I have really bad concentration issues sometimes. And so I don't really appreciate the idea that you just have to, like, buck up and focus, because like that's not how real life works. And I'm like, again, this is a dramedy, but She-Ra also deals with a lot of real world and heavy themes. Like it deals with mental health and suicidal ideation and abuse and family trauma and generational trauma and all that stuff. So all that to say is like she's great. She's great, but like anyway, sorry, I was checking the stream discussion. She's
an Achilles heel here that keeps it from being perfect.
Right. And and again, I do not often talk about that aspect of her arc, not because it's not important, but because it is a really, like, how do I put this? It was unintentional, so it's not like Shadow Weaver where it was a calculated attempt to give this character a particular arc and ending that was bad. And second, it was also a very small part of her arc in the long run, and so I'm like, I have a problem with it. I can talk about it if people want to hear it, but I'm not going to dwell on it the way I do with Kingdom of Heaven. LOL. But I'm not going to dwell on it the way I do with Shadow Weaver's arc, because I think at the end of the day, and Trap does actually tells a good story. Shadow Weaver's is fundamentally broken in the long run. I hate that I had to say that, but it's true. Goodness. So, I don't know. That's why I'm writing my series, though, because I knew after the show ended that if I didn't get my thoughts, if I didn't fix what happened, I would never be able to get any sort of closure for it, which some people would say that is a problem, but I'm like, this is how I'm dealing with my grief. So, yeah. Hello, Nana. I know you can hear me even though you can't talk. Let's see.
Still be around a little bit, but I'm gonna start cooking dinner.
Sounds good.
So, yeah, I'll be in and out here.
Yeah. I have really bad allergies today, so if anybody on YouTube sees me, like, scratching at my nose a lot, I am trying to prevent myself from sneezing and blowing out my mic. I'm just spitballing with this outline. I'm not even following, like, what I taught myself with this outline, because I'm trying a new pose. Oh yeah, this is also kind of a graphic picture and does have some self-harm involved in it, so if you are not into that, you might want to just listen from now on. So, yeah. It's not severe. It's not severe, and I don't even know if it's going to be in the actual picture, but I just thought I would warn just in case. I try not to make my pictures too gory or anything, but this scene is another intense one. But it's not like self-harm as in like, I'm like, like I'm depressed and I want to end myself and stuff like that. It's like a calculated sacrifice. So don't ever say that I don't write sacrifices, because I do. So yeah, but yeah, do be careful. I will probably warn again if it ends up going in that direction. But I'm not usually into that super, so. Okay, I need to move Regina down a little bit. Yeah, it doesn't look like her wrists are going to be in the picture, so I think that it'll be fine. That's a really bad outline for the head, but that's what... Aren't outlines meant to be bad? I don't know.
I guess so. I mean, outlines are kind of meant to be bad, like rough drafts.
Yeah.
Like, you look at your rough draft, and I could say, with writing, I'm very thankful that I started utilizing beta readers and editing when I started writing my Smash fic, because without that, I don't know, I don't want to know where I would be today with it, honestly. But also there's Grammarly and everything like that, where it's like, look back on rough drafts, and it's like, wow, I'm so glad I changed this, because if that never happened, ugh.
Yeah, I definitely understand that. I didn't make use of beta readers until the last Kaimali, actually. So it's been a pretty recent thing for me. And my works before that definitely show. So.
Yeah, I think it's the same with WHHS's original screenplay. I mean, we did do editing with that. Me and my co-author, we did edit it together, but we never had a third-party beta reader to help with that. And I don't like looking back on that because it shows, and it's still up on the internet because I want to be honorable with it, because he did help me with writing it, and taking it down would feel kind of cheap in my opinion. But in order to move it away from AO3, I decided to delete it from AO3 and put it on Google Docs in public form instead.
That's a good idea.
Now, the link to that is in my author's notes for chapter 1, like right at the beginning. But you have to click on the link if you do want to read through the original screenplay. So it's like, hey, you want to see how far I've come and how it could have ended up if it stayed this way, then you can check it out if you want, but it's going to be a different story effectively by the end of this, because I changed a bunch of things.
Yeah, so, I did that with Starwalker, mostly because my average output for books is like a book every year pretty much. So to not have a book for 2021 was really hard for me to handle. I felt like I had betrayed my readers and stuff because I needed so much more time to work on it, because it was suffering a lot. I've often compared it, if you're like marginally familiar with how crazy the Emperor's New Groove was with the production process, it was my Kingdom of the Sun draft. It was definitely, it had so many plot problems, and it was like fundamentally broken. So I gave people the rough draft to read, and I was like, this is all going to be overhauled. None of this probably is going to make it into the final copy. So okay, so I'm trying to think. So that is going to be this here. That is the right hand. So if the right hand is like this, would that be along the... It would be... Okay, yeah, that's... She has two left hands right now. Okay.
Yeah, hands are hard.
Yeah.
Hands are ugh, scary. Nobody likes drawing hands.
No, I don't. I hate it. Um, yeah, but I think that Starwalker needed that extra, like, pretty much a year of development because if not, it would have ended up really, like, it would have ended up, like, you could, and people who have read the draft can, they told me they could see, they could, like, feel my frustration trying to make this story work in the text. And to me, that was, like, a huge red flag that I needed to rework it.
Yeah. Now, going back to the book a year thing, I relate to that because when I first started getting into writing as a full time hobby, like, for me, it was like one book a year because, like, the screenplay of WHHS was 2019 and well into 2020. That took up an entire year. I wrote a couple short one shots, but doing one shots didn't really satisfy me, and I decided, you know what? I'm going to get back into this Smash Brothers fanfic that I've been thinking about doing for years, but I've never actually done it. And then I started working on that, and that took an entire year. And that was throughout, into 2021. And then with my next long fic, that filled out the rest of 2021. And now with WHHS, it's going to be taking up basically all of 2022. Like, although I started in 2021, back in the summer, I want to say, um, like exactly 2 years nearly after the original screenplay version was released. Well, no, not released, but we began writing on it, and then this one has been the hardest I've ever worked with any story, even more than Decagon, because like Decagon, I did 38 chapters week to week, and that was interesting. And it was fun while it lasted because I didn't go all out hardcore with editing like I am with WHHS, but I'm never doing that again. That's not that's not a wise thing to do. I don't want that feeling of overly high adrenaline again.
Yeah, I enjoy sometimes writing stuff that is unedited, but I never post it because I'm just like you like people are not coming for unedited crap. Like they're coming to get my message, and often my problem is that I write by the seat of my pants. So like I have an outline, but like I have this thing and it's like all I will say is like in this scene this character dies, and then like all the rest is up to me to like pants on the spot. I find that it keeps things exciting. So the problem with that though is that because I write by the seat of my pants, I often write stuff that is very offensive, and I normally do not want people reading that because they will cancel me. So, yeah.
Yeah, I would say I relate to that to a degree with my Smash Bros. Fic. I will say though, like Decagon is not unedited because it is. I did have a beta reader for that checked like simple grammar and spelling mistakes and also continuity error, which
Mhm.
was helpful. But it wasn't. It definitely wasn't as rigorous as it was with WHHS. Like,
Yeah.
Robot is a wonderful person. She's nice, but she's not as effective as you are concerning beta editing or suggesting or anything like that.
I'm
Like,
glad
it's
that
been a
I've been
been a
able to
very
help.
different experience because here it's like I feel like I'm a professional writer now rather than a hobbyist. It's a
Aw.
whole new ball game.
I'm glad I could help you. That was nice. I enjoyed
Yeah, no
the
problem.
I enjoyed the process. Didn't enjoy my health issues I had while writing it, but can't really be helped, I guess.
Unfortunately, that's true. But despite all that, you did a good job. And
Thanks.
I would hope and pray that you would love to stay on with the one shots that I do in the future, which you have agreed to, but I
Yeah, my
understand life stuff happens sometimes.
yeah,
So
life stuff happens, and I'm gonna be starting to do this professionally. Actually, like this evening, my mom's gonna help me with my resume. We were gonna do it before the stream, but we had some communication gaffes, so I think we'll do it after, I guess. So this is the last picture I'm gonna be doing for today, but it's an important one, so.
Dope.
This is the first. I think this is the first scene where there's an on-screen. No, that's not true. The last picture I did, there was an on-screen dead person, but no, this is the second picture in Starwalker where there's an on-screen dead person. People like to joke. People joke about Shadow Weaver being the only She-Ra character with an on-screen body count, which is true because She-Ra's a Y7. But the thing is, like, all her victims usually are like she basically like consumes all of their magic and like their bodies disappear. So people always respond with, "You can't have a body count if there are no bodies to count." So I'm like, okay. Okay. That's actually good. I'm shocked at how well that turned out. Except I'm gonna do a nose surgery. Yeah, that's a lot better. Okay, that's nice because her wrists are now out of view and her chest is covered by her hair, so none of her wounds are going to be showing. You're fine to look.
Hooray.
Ooh, this is one of my favorite pictures, actually. I like it. You know when you do something like super awesome when you're writing or drawing or whatever, and you're just like, perfect. Just picture me doing like the meme from The Emperor's New Groove where Pacha is just like, perfect. Okay. Oh, crap. Or not, the last picture has a dead person. The picture before that. The choking picture. My series is definitely darker than She-Ra itself, by the way. They deal with all these issues, but I can deal with them better because I'm not making a Y7 TV show that's going to be on Netflix. Alright, I'm gonna mute my mic because I'm about to sneeze. Be right back. Alright, unmuted. My allergies are making me cough and sneeze a lot, so try not to catch that on camera because my microphone is very sensitive.
I now have my dinner.
Yay!
I'm eating pierogies.
You're eating what?
I'm consuming pierogies.
Ooh, tasty.
They're the standard mashed potato and cheese flavor, but I think the recipe on the box said they're that there's some kind of onion powder flavoring in there. And I taste a little onion in it.
Ooh, that sounds
Unless
tasty.
I'm going crazy. Oh, I love pierogies. Pierogies are amazing.
Someday I want you to cook something for me, because maybe you could teach me how to cook or something, because I'm really bad at it. I'm actually going to do some this summer, some like Latin American cooking, but oh man, I'm really bad at it. Everything I've ever tried to do, I screw up on, and I end up either making something inedible or I almost burn the house down. So, anyway, go ahead.
You're gluten-free, right?
I am gluten-free. I do not eat gluten or cane sugar. Those are or peanuts. Those three are the main things that I avoid because I'm allergic to peanuts. I'm not like anaphylactic allergic, but I'm still not supposed to be having them, basically.
Okay, all right. So rice would be allowed.
Yeah, rice would be fine. I don't like it very much, but that's an autism thing, unfortunately. I don't know if there's anything I can do to change that. I tolerate rice though, so it's not a thing.
Correct.
Yeah, but I am a picky eater, unfortunately, because I don't know, I just have texture issues with food and stuff. It's a problem. And not to mention, I also have to account for the fact that I have IBS, and then I have to find stuff that,
twinsies.
Yeah. So I have a lot of food issues from like, oh, there's so many issues going on, but like it's become just like not like I can't even do baking or anything because like I can't taste test anything because if I do I will feel like garbage. So
have you ever had Mexican style rice?
I have. I can't remember. I just need something that that is soft and doesn't stick in my throat. That's the main hurdle, I guess.
If you insert enough moisture into the rice, you should be able to avoid the stickiness, but you have to insert enough sauce and enough water to avoid stickiness, but also like don't put in too much. If you put in too much and you don't cook it long enough, it will be sticky. But then if you cook it too long, it's going to be hard.
Yeah.
And that's the trouble that you get with rice. Now, rice cookers make it easy, but I don't own a rice cooker. I cook rice in a pan, so I gotta watch it fairly closely to make sure that I don't burn the rice.
We cook our rice in the
I don't
pan.
pull it out of the pan too early, unless it's all mushy and stuff.
Yeah. Oh crap. Anyway. Yeah, that makes sense. We cook our rice not in a pan, but in a pot. So my mom has taught me how, and I've done it a few times, but I think that people just barely tolerate anything that I make, honestly, and I don't blame them.
Have you ever tried inserting caldo de pollo?
No. My mom isn't a very fancy cooker, honestly. She likes to cook, but most of the family has sensitive stomachs. So if it's like a seasoning, she probably hasn't used it. I don't know much about it though. Just doesn't ring a bell.
Like caldo de pollo is the foundational spice that you want to use, and you don't need any other spice in your rice. You just put in a teaspoon of caldo de pollo, you mix it in, and then the only things left are, well, water, the rice itself, and also a kind of a tomato sauce base where you mix together tomato paste, onions, minced garlic, and water all at once. You just make it in a blender, you pour it in with the water, then you cook it off, you wait until there's no moisture left, but also don't overcook it to the point where it's not too dry.
Mm-hmm.
And then you pull it out of the pan, you flip it with some forks, and then you consume.
That sounds good.
I will say, concerning... Oh, darn it, what was my thought? I forgot what I was going to say.
Oh, it's okay.
I'm so offended right now. What was I going to say?
It's okay. You want to know how many times... Like, I will be in the middle of a sentence, and then what I was going to say just drops off a cliff. I do that all the time.
Hey, wait. Just remember, as I was checking biofood, I apologize for the obnoxiousness there.
No, you're good.
Your rice on medium.
Yeah.
Medium is the best temperature. If you do it high, then the liquid is going to burn off too quick, and it will not taste as good. If you do it on low, obviously it won't do it fast enough, and the rice will either get too mushy, or you will get bored. And both are bad. So medium is the best temperature. You also want to cover it while it's cooking. After you pour in the rice, like there are 2 steps when you're mixing it in. You want to cook it for a little bit with about 1 cup of water. That's round 1. Round 2 of cooking is where you put in another cup of water along with your tomato sauce that you mix together in the blender. And then you cover up your pan with some kind of like lid or some other kind of covering like wax paper.
Oh, wait. I don't know how... Apparently I don't know how shading markers work. Okay, there we go. Okay, still looks like she has a double chin, but I don't really care anymore. It's passable. Oh, I totally forgot this thing that I have to do. Oh my goodness, that is embarrassing. This is the stream where I do iPad arson, people. Okay. Oh, I need to move that up. Okay. Oh, wait. Hey, I forgot what my character was wearing in the literal last scene of this chapter. Funny that.
Sometimes I forget what my characters are wearing too. And before I send commission ideas to Andrea, I'm like, okay, so what were they wearing? And I have to go back to the text and I'm like, okay, we're going to come this over and come that over and see if we can find anything.
Oops. Yeah, I definitely... Sometimes I don't even describe what the characters are wearing because I'm just like... I am a very bare bones describer. It's actually a weakness of mine, but in some contexts it can be a strength because I'm not making paragraphs of description to the detriment of what's actually going on. But at the same time, some people are like, Joy, you're falling into the white box problem. So... I just realized, I think you said your real name on the last... Oh, wait, no, that wasn't on the last stream. That was off stream. My bad. When we were talking, like, over...
Correct.
Yeah, I was like, oh, wait. But in any case, that stream is gone because I am clumsy and cannot tech, so... Yeah.
Yes, and I did not name my last name.
Yeah.
And nobody shall know.
I think that some people will know my last name based on that unaired stream, but I don't know. Do whatever you want with that. Just don't come and kill me. If you come and kill me, I'm Texan. So, I'm just kidding. That was not a veiled threat.
Get out damn guns. And
yeah, I know. I know.
Town.
I know. My parents do have firearms, but like I'm totally joking. Like we would just report you to the police. We wouldn't, unless it was like a literal thing where I'm about to die or something like that. Yeah, but I do joke about us having 2 guns for the 2 biceps, you know? I don't know if we actually have 2 guns. I just joke about it like that.
It's like, you do that and you're like, some creep marches up to your door, but then you just come out with like a bunch of machine guns riding in a bull.
Yep.
And you're like, welcome to Texas, yeehaw, mother bleeper.
Oh my goodness!
Do whatever.
Yeah, that's exactly how I joke about it online, because some people are just like, the Texans, they don't listen to anybody, and I'm like, yeah, that is very true. But also, we're not dangerous inherently. I mean, no more than any given human is dangerous, but...
Florida, man.
Oh yeah, Florida's... They say Texas is crazy.
I'm sorry.
No, it's true. It's true that Florida's kind of insane.
Oh no.
No, they are. I'm just kidding. Jenny lives in Florida. If you're watching this stream by chance, hi Jenny. But some people are kind of crazy in Florida. Okay, let's see if I can get another.
Memes are some of my favorite memes.
Oh man, they're so fresh. I don't know if that makes sense. They're so fresh. Well, okay, so I'm gonna get slightly political here, but it's local politics, so hopefully people don't murder me for it. Abbott, like our governor, he had said that it was okay to carry a gun even if you didn't have a permit to do so, which I'm not gonna say my opinion on. I think you can guess what my opinion is, but like I am not, but like that is a very Texan thing to say. So, yeah. So on that note, Art Stream has now concluded. I finished chapters 67 and 68 of Starwalker. Those will be available to watch, or not, well, yeah, available to watch. There's playback for this, but available on my Tumblr and my Instagram. I will continue the next stream on Monday.